Hi, Pastor Nathan Decker here of Your Better Together devotion for today, and I started with the rail today because this is one of the most interesting pieces of furniture that we have in the church, because a lot of folks, we have lots of different opinions about where this came from, why it's here, and all those other things. And one of the things that church historians argue about is whether or not that this was meant to be a boundary. It definitely separates the church. It separates the pews from the chancel area, and everything that's going on up here is separated from there. And so it divides. It creates this boundary. You know, and one of the things I heard a church historian once say was that possibly this was meant to keep the chickens and the farm animals from coming up to the communion table. I don't know. I like to think that it was kind of a distinguishment of the Holy of Holies and things like that from the temple days. But I don't know, and I don't think we'll ever get that answer. But I begin with this concept of boundaries because when we're trying to raise our children, one of the places that we have to teach them, one of the things that we have to start teaching our children is that there are boundaries. In fact, when you are a child, the boundaries are really close and tight. And yet, as you grow up, the boundaries get ever and ever bigger and broader and more beyond your comprehension. Think about this. When you were born and when your mom and dad brought you home, they placed you in a crib. It had bars on it, a lot like this altar rail. And so you were limited in your ability to go out and about, and they watched over you like a hawk. And maybe as you grew older, you were able to go into the living room, and you were able to go into their bedroom, and you were able to have your own room, and then you got into the yard, and you went places with them in the store, but they always kept you close at hand, but your boundaries continued getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And as your boundaries got bigger, the responsibility that you had for your behavior, for your actions, for your time, all of that also increased. The same is true for our children as we raise them in faith. When people come to faith, we kind of put boundaries on them to somewhat guide them and lead them. But then we ever increase them to say, hey, you have to grow beyond what you thought was the limit. You have to grow beyond what you thought was the place where God only existed in this box. It's much bigger than you thought it was. We have to grow beyond our boundaries. Boundaries and responsibility together are some of the most important tools God gives us to raise our children. We have to teach them responsibilities about time and space, personal space, and words, and all kinds of other things. The same is true within our faith context. We're called to teach boundaries and responsibility. You know, there's things that we do and don't do as people of faith, and there's a reason for those boundaries, because we're taking responsibility for our actions and taking responsibility for the gift that God gives us in grace and love. We should take time to focus on what it means to be a disciple as we raise our children to be disciples. Because within the boundaries and within the places that we give responsibility, that's where people meet one another. And that's where grace is shared. And that's where we find we're better together. This is Pastor Nathan Decker inviting you to click like and share and follow and all those other things, and to join me as we continue striving to raise our children with boundaries and responsibility in an ever-widening love and an ever-widening sense of who God is. Amen.